is really ready to swallow more as the needs of ISAF and the coalition grow. So it's a complex issue, and the comprehensive approach is necessary, including the consent, of course, of the immediate neighbors of Afghanistan, because otherwise you can transit Russia and get stuck. But it also involves some infrastructural improvements on the ground.
Marvin Kalb with the Shorenstein Center at the Kennedy School. I'd like to ask you another question about Afghanistan, and perhaps in the spirit of the intellectual convergence that you spoke about earlier. I wonder if you could look back on the Russian experience in Afghanistan.
I don't want to.
But you could be helpful in this respect, sir. If you look back, are there lessons that Russia learned from that experience that could now be helpfully passed on to the new American administration?
Well, as a matter of fact, this issue has been discussed informally between us and the Americans and other countries for many years. And in a nutshell, you cannot resolve the problems of Afghanistan by force alone, in spite of the fact that against terrorists, force must be used, and that's why after 9/11, the Security Council strongly endorsed the retaliation. The second conclusion is that you cannot resolve the problems related to political system of Afghanistan by some smart schemes from outside. You cannot really build a scheme which would be based on one ethnic group alone, even if this ethnic group is the largest one. You cannot ignore other ethnic groups, so apart from Pashtuns, you have Tajiks, Uzbeks, Hazarians, and each of these regional groups has very close ethnic and historical cultural links with one or another neighbor of Afghanistan. So you also have to take into account this neighborhood factor, and I referred in my introductory remarks that we welcome very much that the regional factor is very much highlighted in the new American approach. You have to involve neighbors. An interesting example, not exactly related to Afghanistan, but how neighbors could play a helpful role when in the early 90s, last century, there was a very bloody war in Tajikistan, civil war in Tajikistan. It was through direct Russian and Iranian mediation, working with different factions, that eventually a peace deal was signed under the UN auspices. So it is important that, apart from this new strategy on Afghanistan, President Obama sent a very strong message that he wants to have a direct dialogue on Iran in a comprehensive way. That's the only way to proceed in this region. The Bush administration engaged Iran a couple of times, but under the condition that they want to discuss only Iraq. And they only want to discuss this by way of asking Iranians not to meddle, with one part of Iraqi groups. And the Iranians participated in these discussions. But this is a piecemeal approach. If you take the region of the Middle East and broaden, well, the Bush administration spoke of the greater Middle East, but this project never materialized in some strategic thinking which would embrace a comprehensive approach. And as far as Iran is concerned, yes, Iran has influence in the region. Iran has influence in Iran, has always had influence in Afghanistan, now has influence in Gaza. In Lebanon, it has good standing. In Gaza, the Iranian influence increased because the West refused to accept the outcome of democratic elections 3 years ago, when Hamas won. And We tried very much. UN tried to find some way to accept this outcome because it was a free and fair election. But the US and the European Union at that time said that this was democratic, but they would not recognize the government. That's why we found the Palestinians now in a split mode. So my answer would be, don't rely on force alone, more emphasis on economic and social development, and this is also part of the Obama strategy. Involve neighbors to provide the setting for all ethnic groups in Afghanistan to feel engaged in building of their own country. Respect the traditions, and the traditions are that Afghanistan never was a highly centralized state. And that's I believe, how consensus is emerging now. And hopefully this would be implemented.
Gentleman back there.
Mr. Lavrov, Zahar Hasanov, I'm an expert from Azerbaijan. You know, today in Prague, Minsk Group co-chairs, they announced that presidents of Azerbaijan and Armenia, they agreed on basic principles of Nagorno-Karabakh final settlement. So from your perspective, is a breakthrough which they promised to achieve, I mean, co-chairs promised to achieve, and do you expect that it's going to bring peace and stability to the region? Thanks a lot.
If the two presidents agreed, of course it's going to bring peace and stability to the region. And the co-chair have been working very hard. This is the conflict on which there are no geopolitical games. US, Russia, Europe in the person of France are three co-chair, and they all work in unison. And actually the basic principles of the settlement have been transmitted to the Armenia and Azerbaijan in the fall of 2007 when they met in Madrid. And those basic principles remained on the table. They have been accepted by both countries with certain caveats related to 3 or 4 issues, which are still to be finally agreed. And the purpose of the current stage in negotiating process is to close the positions on these issues. I have not obviously seen the report as to what specifically was achieved by way of progress, but I hope that this momentum, which has been reached after the meeting last November in Moscow, now in Prague, and both Armenian and Azerbaijan president accepted the invitation to come to the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, in the margins of which they would have an opportunity to have another meeting if they so wish. I believe this momentum is encouraging, and we keep our fingers crossed, of course, but it's a quiet process. It's not possible to discuss details of what the two presidents discuss, but we are generally optimistic about the possibility of progress and achieving an agreement soon.
Yes.
Caroline McGregor, U.S. Department of Energy. Mr. Minister, you spoke about the special responsibilities the U.S. and Russia have in terms of nuclear issues, but it strikes me that the same could be said in terms of climate change, given that the U.S. and Russia are both giant economies and ergo very large emitters. I know that also the cabinet has discussed a climate doctrine recently, so I wonder if you could speak a bit about what Russia's priorities are and what you'd like to see out of Copenhagen at the end of this year. Thank you very much.
The priorities, I believe, similar to the priorities of most countries of the world: save the climate, save the planet, do so in a